Good morning.
Good morning.
Prior to becoming the Dean of Students at Oxford High School, you worked in various schools and school districts. Is that correct?
Yes.
For most of your career, in fact, you worked with at-risk students.
Yes.
Normally, that includes students with some sort of academic or behavioral problems.
Yes, that is correct.
In fact, your role at Oxford High School, you testified today, primarily you dealt with the code of conduct,
Yes.
behavioral and academic intervention,
Yes.
and issues with attendance.
Yes.
You had not had contact with Mr. Crumbley's son until November 30th of 2021.
That's correct.
So, as far as you know, once you became employed by Oxford High School, there were no behavioral issues with Mr. Crumbley's son?
There was not.
No academic issues? No attendance issues?
No.
You learned on November 29th of 2021 that Mr. Crumbley's son was looking at bullets on his phone in class.
Yes, that is correct.
But once you had been made aware of it, or once you learned of it, you learned that that had already been handled by Mr. Hopkins and Ms. Fine. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you didn't do anything else with anything that day?
No.
Okay.
I didn't need to do anything further based on the fact that Ms. Fine and Mr. Hopkins did everything that I would have done in that situation.
Okay. So you didn't see any need for additional discipline or any additional intervention or anything like that, correct?
That's correct.
On November 30th of 2021, you were advised by one of Mr. Crumbley's son's teachers that he was writing inappropriate statements on his on a math assignment.
Yes.
You were quickly shown a picture of the assignment on a cell phone, if you recall.
Yes. That is
You
correct.
didn't look at it very well, correct?
No.
You saw that there were drawings,
Yes.
but you didn't see necessarily what all the drawings were. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
You did see the words blood everywhere,
Yes.
but you didn't see much beyond that.
That's correct.
To you, the words on the page were more concerning than the drawings themselves, right?
I would agree with that, yes.
And that's because sometimes kids in high school draw violent things.
Absolutely, yes.
That's not abnormal.
It's not abnormal.
You felt that what was on the page here was not appropriate for school, is that correct?
Yep, I would agree with that.
But that it wasn't in and of itself concerning,
Yes.
and that you didn't see it as a threat to anybody.
That is correct.
You didn't see a correlation of violence with the drawings on the paper?
I did not know.
Again, Mr. Crumbley's son had no prior disciplinary history,
He did not know.
no prior bad behavior.
He did not.
He was a pretty average student.
He was, yes.
He'd only missed one class that year.
I can't speak to that.
You said you dealt with attendance, so that's why I was asking.
Sure.
So you're not aware of his attendance
I'm not
history?
aware of specifically his attendance.
Okay. He had none of the typical early indicators that there would be an issue of concern other than these isolated incidents from November 29th and November 30th that you were aware of.
Judge, I'm just going to object to the form of the question. Typical indicators. This witness can testify regarding code of conduct and discipline, but that's it.
Yeah, but unless he is able to testify about what a typical indicator would be by his experience.
And I can ask him that, Your Honor. Based on your experience dealing and your education and training with at-risk students and for your position as the Dean of Students, there are what you would consider early indicators of potentially concerning or threatening behavior. Is that fair?
I would say that's a fair statement.
Some of those include prior disciplinary history,
Yes.
prior bad behavior by the student,
Yes.
issues with grades,
Yes.
issues with attendance.
Yes.
Okay. So, knowing all of that, none of those, what I'm calling early indicators, were present other than the two incidents that you were aware of on November 29th and November 30th of 2021.
As far as I was aware, yes.
You sat in on the conversation between Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Crumbley's son on November 30th of 2021.
Yes, I did.
And that was before his Mr. Crumbley and his wife got to the school.
That's correct.
Based on the information that you had at that time, you did not believe that Mr. Crumbley's son posed a threat to anyone.
That's a fair statement, yes.
You were even less concerned after you confirmed some of the information that you'd learned from Mr. Crumbley's son with Mr. Crumbley's wife.
Yes, after she had confirmed all the information he shared with us, my concern from a discipline standpoint was pretty much lowered all the way to none at that point.
Okay. And You said all of the information that he had shared with you, and we've heard some about that, but I just want to confirm. That was about the losses that he'd experienced in 2021, correct? The loss of a family member?
Yes.
The loss of his family dog?
Yes.
A friend had moved away?
Yes.
He'd struggled with COVID?
He did, yes.
He had a hard time with virtual school?
Yes.
Those were the things that you confirmed with his family, with his parents?
Along with his desire for graphic design and video games, and that they thought he should focus more on academics rather than that, which is what he had shared with us during the meeting.
Okay. When you say he had shared with us, are you referencing a discussion or an argument he had with his parents the night before that related to video game design and grades, or was this something separate?
Both. No, he had shared that he was interested in that and that he didn't feel his parents supported that, and that led to an argument the night before, but he didn't provide any context to that at all, and they had confirmed that, but they also didn't provide any context to that either.
So there was a confirmation that the student and Mr. Crumbley's son and Mr. Crumbley and his wife had an argument with their son the night before. It sounded to you like it may have related to video game design and grades, but you didn't have any context beyond what you believed it to be about.
That's correct, yes.
Now, obviously, during these meetings, you expect for a student's parents to give you information about things that they are concerned about, correct?
Typically in these meetings, parents come to them and they provide additional context, stuff they're seeing at home, a history of, especially in a mental health situation, a history of any kind of counseling, and any issues they've had at other schools or whatever, but they usually provide additional information.
So you said specifically things that they see at home, things that they're concerned about. Obviously, in order for a parent to see something at home or be concerned about it, they have to be aware of it. Is that fair?
Speculation too, Jen.
I don't know how a parent could be concerned if they're not aware of something.
The dean of students can't testify as to how a parent would be aware of something at home in a meeting, not even specific to what we're talking about here.
Actually, my question was different, Your Honor. My question was, he would expect that, or it's his belief that if a parent is concerned about something, then they're aware of it.
Well, then it's a lack of personal knowledge. Mr. Ejak was the dean of students in Oxford High School in November of 2021, in charge of discipline and code of conduct issues, Judge. Mr. Hopkins was the counselor. He's already testified.
Okay. I think are you asking him if the parents aren't aware of something, they're not aware of it?
Kind of, Your Honor. Obviously, and I can ask my question differently and see if it makes it a little more simple.
All right.
Mr. Ejak, based on your experience, your education and your training, and just your knowledge in general of you're a human being, if someone doesn't have knowledge of something, they can't talk about it. Is that fair? Does that make sense to you?
I would say that's a fair statement.
So we can't talk about things we don't know about. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Obviously, James Crumbley can't tell you about things he may not be aware of. I'm sorry.
Yes.
You weren't concerned on November 30th of 2021 by Mr. Crumbley's son looking at bullets or drawing guns. Is that fair?
I think there was a level of concern there, which is why we called the parents in for the meeting.
And if you recall, the level of concern was regarding the appropriateness of behavior in school.
Yes.
You didn't find his interest in guns or bullets concerning, especially in the Oxford community, if you remember.
Yes, that's correct.
You've had students draw guns on papers in the past.
Yes, that's correct.
In fact, students in Oxford, not all of them, I'm not saying all students in Oxford, but there are students in Oxford who have guns in their home.
Yes.
You know that there are students in Oxford who handle firearms.
That's a fair
Okay.
statement.
You would agree that it's not unusual
No, it's not unusual.
in that community.
In that community, yes.
I'm not asking you to speak about any other community, but in that community, it's not unusual for students to handle guns.
That's correct.
When faced with a situation where a student has drawn guns on papers, you typically use your education and training to assess the risk.
As far as a discipline standpoint,
Discipline or otherwise, whatever your role is in that assessment.
yes, so my role would be to look for any violation of our code of conduct. And so that by itself, the drawings on the worksheet, don't violate a code of conduct.
And a violation of the code of conduct would also encompass any sort of a threat to other people. Is that fair?
That's a fair statement.